Hi, this is Siofra Bradigan, and this is Siofra's Magic Alcove. So today I wanted to start talking a little bit more about astral mental projection, dream realities, the Akashic records, things of that nature. So we'll see where this goes. It is a rather huge subject, obviously, and one of the purposes for sharing this information is to help put into context whatever might be happening for you. I don't know how to tell people how to astral project. There's bunches of books that give you exercises and things. I just went through a phase where I did it a lot, and I still do on occasion, but now I more often than not mental project, and that I do on purpose. And that's a little bit different than astral projection. So I guess first off, this is my Mercury wand, which I decided would be a good thing to have with me today because we have Mercury in retrograde again until the 3rd of November. And it's always better to have, I have something to help you maintain focus and communicate better, which is why I made my Mercury wand in the first place. I figure if I had a tool for the planet, I'd be much more capable of riding out any shifts in the energy field because I charge it up when it's not in retrograde. So, and this is made out of eucalyptus, for those who might be wondering, and it still has a wonderful smell to it. I was noticing when I picked it up before I brought it in here. And these are all opals, fire opals, white opals, and honey opals. This is a clear quartz at the top, and this is another opal. So it has that opal energy being absorbed by the quartz at the top of the thing. So anyway, I also brought along my piece of polychrome. Not sure how well you can see that. It's a type of jasper, and I discovered that polychrome helps me to distinguish uh, more easily between my different bodies, my physical body, my astral body, and my mental body. And so, considering the subject, it seemed like a good idea to have that around. So that's me. So I think in the beginning, I had a lot of flying dreams, and I think that's pretty typical that when we're learning how to astral project or curious about it or thinking about it, that having dreams of flying is pretty common. And it's always interesting. Like all of us have slightly different flying dreams. With me, it usually started with me like trying to get away from something in my dream, and then I would discover that if I jumped, I didn't just like jump a little bit, but I would jump a lot and I'd kind of start to float. And then I would start jumping higher and higher until suddenly I could stay up there and I could float around and, look at the other components of my dream from that perspective. And yeah, everyone's going to have slightly different flying dreams. I don't like dreams about height because I have a fear of heights, but I do have those dreams too where I suddenly find myself on like a ski lift, and then I look down and realize that the ski lift is higher than the mountains are, and I'm way the heck up there, and I'm like, no, I don't want to be up here. And I think I usually devolve back into another dream in those. I don't really remember like jumping out of the ski lift and flying around when it came to that. But when I was conscious and having out of body experiences, uh, they varied quite a bit as well. And that undoubtedly has to do with our brain, how it works, what we're going through at the time, who's there. I had one interesting experience in my bedroom one night where I had discovered that if I dreamt that I was spinning like dizzy in a dream, that seemed to be a precursor to leaving my body. And I had this dream where I was walking around my neighborhood, and I hit like an invisible barrier. Then I had to turn around and walk and hit another invisible barrier, and I was going back and forth between these two invisible barriers over and over again. And then I suddenly got that spinning sensation, similar to when you go outside and spin around really super, super fast, and all of a sudden it seems like the ground is coming up around you as you fall down onto the ground, which I used to do when I was a kid. I loved doing that, thought that was so much fun. That similar type of feeling. And when I fell like that in the dream, I woke up in my astral body as it was peeling off of my physical body. And there was a being, two different beings, at the foot of my bed that night. and I saw them. And the thing that was fascinating about having that experience was your field of vision is so completely different when you're not in your body, because in your body you have these physical limits that you can only see, like, so far out. Your peripheral vision is, about that for most of us. I mean, I can see that I have a hand there, but I can't see like how many fingers there are. I know that because I'm in them, but I can't actually see it. I'd have to be farther over here to see more of my hand. But I know that there's something there, like about sideways. And we're all going to have different bodies and different peripheral vision because, you know, that's the way we are in our physical bodies. But in my astral body, I could see, like, from about here, there was like a small section just behind my head that I couldn't see, but from about right next to my ear back and all the way around to the other side, I could see everything all at once. And the interesting thing too was, even though this happened in the night, in the middle of the night, it wasn't dark. I could see everything quite clearly. It wasn't dark at all in the astral, and I could see even like so much detail. Even little motes of dust were clear as a bell, and I could see everything in the room as well as the spirits that were in the room with me. And that was a somewhat short-lived experience for my consciousness because it slipped back into a dream state as I was peeling off my body and noticing all these things down at my feet. And I was very excited when, like, I did it, I'm out of my body. And then, whoop, oh, there it goes again. And so then I was unconsciously astral projecting, which is probably the most common thing any of us have or do. According to some sources, whenever you sleep and you dream, dreams are things that take place out in the astral. And whether that's actually the astral or the mental realm is up for debate. They call it astral. Uh, and there is a big difference between the two. So, who knows for sure exactly. But it's when we're dreaming and we're already in that kind of in-between place when we're dreaming, is why people often have encounters with the deceased loved ones, or their spirit guides. I had a lot of dream encounters with Moida. She would come and tell me things and appear in a dream and give me information and that kind of stuff. And so that's a pretty common thing. And it's in that state that you can also visit past lives, maybe even get glimpses of the future, because time, we think of time as a linear reality. For us, we're born, each moment, each second progresses us into the next one. And so we're a constantly moving consciousness through time. But time itself isn't like that. That's just our experience of time. And although, there is that reality of like geological evidence that tells us the history of what was here at one point on Earth with fossils and that kind of thing, our physical reality seems to definitely conform to that notion of time. When it comes to actual time itself, everything is kind of all at once, and it's just our experience of time that makes it go from the past to the present to the future, which is a fun experiment to try and wrap your brain around. Everything happens now. So there is no time, there is no past, there is no present, there is no future. But then we're focused on trying to be in the moment as much as we can. And I think that is a way of getting the most out of the experiences that are implicit in whatever moment we find ourselves in. So enough of that. So I did a lot of unconscious astral projection, we'll call it, since I wasn't sure what I was doing at the time, to the point where other people saw me almost by location. I had numerous people tell me that I visited them, and they saw me in their house in the middle of the night. And one guy was like, I he was chasing me through his house, and I was laughing at him, and I kept on disappearing into different places. I don't have conscious memory of that, so it's sort of, it's always interesting to hear stories about yourself. And I went through a period of time where people would see me in different locations. When I was younger and pregnant with my son, people insisted that they saw me at places I wasn't, like, in a bar. And I was home, but they said I was there, and I'm like, no, I wasn't, and they didn't believe me. And when I lived up in the Kispiox Valley, I was apparently present at several parties when I was sleeping in my own bed in my cabin. So I don't know if maybe they were crazy and on drugs and seeing things, or if I was present enough in my astral form that they could see me in their state, or what. But it was annoying and interesting all at the same time. My son, when he was in, I think, the fourth grade, maybe. I think it was the fourth grade, somewhere around there. Maybe a little bit older. It's hard to remember, but he was having trouble with penmanship, and I suggested he needed to practice his penmanship. And apparently, he bilocated in school. He would put his head down in his one class and then wake up in the penmanship class so that he could practice writing, and he was actually marked present in both classes. So that was sort of interesting. And I think that there's a lot of times that we're doing things like this and aren't necessarily conscious of our activities, especially when we're first starting out. It's just kind of like, if it happens, it happens, and there you are. And I certainly had a few of them that I remembered pretty vividly. I was talking about this one the other day where I was in a car driving across the country. This was with my first husband and our friends. And I was bored, sitting in the back seat. I think we were in Tennessee. And I was out of my body, just kind of wandering around, trying to think of something to do because there wasn't anything to do. And I thought, well, I've never tried going under the ground. Maybe I should go under the ground and see what it looks like under there. It just suddenly popped into my head. So I dove under the highway and found myself in a secret military installation. Rather unexpected turn of events. And I'm looking around and going like, whoa, now this is strange. There's like people, there's hallways, there's like all this stuff everywhere. And then it seemed someone there knew I was there, and then I got worried. Like some alarm went off. They had psychic alarms, and I'm like, uh-oh. And I jumped back into the car, and I'm telling everybody, hey, we're like driving over a secret military base. It's like right under the highway. And they're like looking at me. And then we look up on the hills around us and suddenly see military vehicles appearing on these dirt roads between the different hills as we're going by. And I'm like, see, look, there they are. Who knows for sure how real that might have been. But there were vehicles, and they were definitely military. So I'm thinking I did accidentally stumble into a secret military installation. And then I didn't want to tell anybody about it for a long time because, uh-oh. So, one of the things I liked to do a lot when I was younger was get rides on comets. I loved riding on a comet. I would be out wandering through the solar system. And I remember these things in like bits and pieces. But I remember the like sitting on a comet and riding towards the sun and thinking that that was just way cool, and going to the different planetary spheres and meeting some of the spirits that lived there. So met and knew like the Venusian spirits and the Jupiterians and the Martians and the lunar beings and so forth before I ever read a book about them. So that was kind of interesting when I met Ian and he introduced me to Barden's work and some of the ceremonial stuff and the talk about the beings that live in the different planetary spheres and what they're like and so forth and I'm just like, yeah, well, I knew that. Okay. So I'm glad other people knew that too. So isn't that interesting kind of, moment for me? But I'm confident at this point was mental travel mostly because I remember an instance with my sister when we were walking down the street. I was probably, I don't know, 14 maybe, somewhere in there. We were having a particularly nice day, like family wise, with her and I, because I remember this nice warm feeling that I had, um, and we were holding hands, and the sun was shining, and the warmth of the sun on my skin, and then wondering what the sun looked like, and closing my eyes and just wondering what does the surface of the sun look like, and then suddenly finding myself above the sun and looking at it and seeing all these rivers and mountains all made out of fire and being surprised because in school, when they, at that point in time, when they described the surface of the sun, it's just this big giant ball of fire. There was no talk of features or, that you could have a river of fire going down a canyon of fire or anything. That came a lot later when we sent up some satellites in space and then started to get better pictures of the sun. And then they started to see these kinds of features, which was encouraging to me. It was another one of those things that sort of proves the point after the fact. It's like corroborating evidence that what I saw in my own mind was corroborated in physical reality, even at a time when we didn't have any way to confirm it. It took time for science and technology to catch up to what I saw. So I thought that was pretty cool. Um, so one of the things uh, that has become known in psychology and stuff like that is that people who are undergoing severe trauma, physical, emotional abuse, often leave their bodies when they have abuse happening to them. It's a way to disassociate from the event, and so uh, it doesn't mean that those out of body experiences aren't real and genuine and don't have another way to happen without that. It just means that that is a survival instinct that some people have in order to extricate themselves from a bad situation so they don't have to experience all the things that are going on. So that could be one of the reasons why I had a lot of spontaneous out of body experiences because of my childhood trauma and so forth. Who knows? But anyway, with the on purpose mental traveling, I do that a lot when I'm doing distance healing work. I told you about that during the video on energetic healing, I think, where I went to, visit a child and saw what I saw there. And in the video of cutting cords, where I went there and saw things, those all happen on the mental plane. And I think that there's probably a lot more of that we're doing than we're consciously aware of. Thoughts, of course, that we have that leave our head and head towards someone else as a thought form can be received by them, and then they might think of us. They may not know that that's why they're suddenly thinking of us, or we're suddenly thinking of them, or what have you. But that all also happens like on the mental plane. And the thing about working with things on the mental plane as opposed to the astral plane is that you have a little bit more distance from the emotional component of whatever it is that's going on. It allows you a little bit of overview, which is something that you gain after a lot of experience but it's not something that you necessarily have as much control over when you're in your astral body, because your astral body is where all your emotions and feelings and stuff are housed when it comes to figuring out those parts of the human mind. Um, so mental travel is something that anybody can do and get better at. And you're doing a little bit something like that when you're doing divination and scrying and you're looking to see something that isn't really there right now. And so these things are all kind of woven together. And when it comes to working with spirits and beings and stuff like that in the dream world, the lucid dreaming helps a lot. There's no doubt about it. And lucid dreaming definition is basically becoming aware of the fact that you are in a dream while you're dreaming, not after the fact. And usually, if you can become consciously aware of the fact that you're in a dream, then you can change or control the dream. And I've done that, and it's kind of fun. It's like, I'm sorry, I don't want this thing following me around. Let me stick a pair of handcuffs on it and stick it on a gate so it leaves me alone, which was one of them I did. That was a pretty cool dream where I was heading towards a cave to talk to the old women who were the wise ones that had kept the knowledge of humanity alive or some such thing, which was way cool. But then I had this disembodied green arm that kept following me around and grabbing me wherever I went. So I had to magic a pair of handcuffs out of the air, and I stuck it on a fence post, and I called it Dream Arm because I knew I was dreaming. Stop that, Dream Arm. And I thought maybe it was green because green and dream, you know, rhyme. That could be why my mind made them turn green. Who knows? But the the thing to remember, no matter where you are and what you're doing, like if you're encountering an individual in a dream and they're telling you that this is reality, this is one person wrote in about having a spirit husband in the dream world, and to address that question, yes, I think that can happen, but make sure that you are the one who's deciding whether it's going to continue or not. Free will is the most important component that we have for any of these experiences. And just because a spirit being comes to you and says, hey, I am like Joe Blow from the planet X, and this is what's going to happen in the future, and I can save you, or this is what you need to do, and, pick up this thing and go do that, you don't have to. And they can lie. It's not necessarily a good idea. If the point of being here is to learn how to be in the moment and accept where we are so then we can move forward and change things, if you get swallowed up by an experience that's not actually rooted in this reality, then you're going to be spending all your time in a different reality and not getting what you need out of this one. That's just as a general rule, not specifically to this person. Everyone's experience is going to be somewhat different. So, let's see. My friend Gary, who had trouble staying in his body, he was somebody who spontaneously astral projected while he was driving, which is like about the worst thing I can imagine anybody doing. It is not a good idea to be doing that when you're behind the wheel of a car. And apparently, one of the things he did, not just when he was, this is other times, one of the places he went to a lot was the Venusian sphere because he liked them. They're beautiful, they're accepting, they're warm, they're lovely, and he was craving that kind of energy. And he came over to my house one night and was telling me about going to the Venusian sphere on a regular basis in the astral, and I told him I was a little concerned about that because one of the things that I know is if you spend too much time in a specific sphere, a different planetary sphere or energetic sphere or whatever, then when you pass from this life, you can end up being drawn into that sphere and forget that you're a human being. So it's one of those things if you've done under controlled conditions and with caution. So, yeah. And apparently, me saying that to him did something. He thinks I did it. I don't know. I was doing a lot of stuff I didn't know I was doing because people kept telling me all these things I was up to that I wasn't consciously aware of. So maybe I did it. But the next time he went to go to the Venusian sphere, there was an astral wall in his way and he couldn't get there. It just stopped him dead. And he couldn't find a way around it. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, that seems like a good thing to me because, you know, you could just go there and completely forget to come back to your body, and that's the end of it. So although I don't know that I did it, I might have because I was worried about him, or he might have because I expressed worry about him, and maybe his unconscious said, "Ooh, that's a bad idea. We shouldn't do that anymore," and did it to himself. It's sometimes hard to know. It's like it can be a combination of these things. So, um, the Akasha is kind of an explaining the Akasha as an element and as a place is difficult because it really gets into that all times are now, there is no time, all places are now, there is no place. Um, it's kind of like the fabric of the universe from the moment of the creation to the moment of extinction, however it is that the universe goes out. It's all there. And it's often described as a library or record because the universe remembers everything that happens. It's not like, Santa with his list, although it could be akin to that. It's not like a conscious effort for the Akasha to remember things. It's sort of the imprint of reality into this field. Um, and if sometimes you're either lucky or skilled, you can travel through time through the Akasha and look up your own history or someone else's history. At the time that this next thing happened to me, someone told me that you were not allowed to go to the Akashic records to look up your own history. And so I absorbed that piece of information and decided that that was true. So I could not go to the Akashic records to look up my own history. And that's where your belief in things becomes a reality, especially the farther from physical reality you go. I mean, in physical reality, you have everyone else's ideas of what's real, and you have the physical reality itself that has its own idea of what's real. So it's a lot harder to impose your own views on physical reality. I could sit here and say that that camera doesn't exist till I was blue in the face, and yet so long as I hit the record button and, processed it later, there would be a record. It's hard to come up with examples sometimes. Anyway, so I did go there once that I know of for sure, and it was a, one of those random things. I knew a woman who she was having some paranormal experiences happen around her, like radios and recording things turning themselves on and off randomly when she was nearby. She was a barber. She had this urge to like kill all of her male customers with a razor blade whenever she shaved them. She couldn't understand why she felt this way. She didn't have anything in this life that she could point to that said, hey, a man did this horrible thing to me. This is why I feel anger towards all men. That's that didn't seem to be a part of it that she could identify. And I was out in the astral or mental realm during my sleep, and she approached me in my dream, actually. And she was wearing a white robe, and I was wearing a white robe. Apparently, it was the way to dress at the time. Who knows? And she came and asked me if I would help her. And because she asked me for help, I was taken to the Akashic records. My experience of being there throughout this semi-dream state, because it was a dream and then wasn't a dream, was standing in a place I knew I'd been standing in for a long time, and in front of me was like a platform, like the kind of platform you put a big book on, and on the platform was this big book, and it was open to these pages. And there was some one presence who was standing behind me that I never saw, who I knew was the keeper. It's like all this stuff, I knew immediately what was going on. And he kept having me look at the pictures they weren't words, they were pictures that turned into scenarios for me to watch, like looking at a section would turn into a mini movie, and I would see this movie of this other woman's life. And I don't know how long I was there because he kept saying, look and remember, look and remember, look and remember. And I finally became conscious of him saying, or her saying, look and remember. And then I was seeing this woman's past life, and it was rather horrific to watch, but I also didn't feel the horrificness of it when I saw it. It was kind of disassociated, I guess would be a good word for it. And I saw that she was actually had been a guard in a German prison camp, and she was someone who enjoyed her job. I think she was a he, and enjoyed her job a lot. And when the Allies came and started to release the people from the camps and was, getting everybody out of there, the higher echelons in Hitler's Germany had escape plans, routes, alternate identities, support, financial things set up for them to leave, and they did. She wasn't high enough up in that particular strata, so her escape was a small town in northern Germany with a new identity and a piece of property. And so she left to go to her new identity, and then the Allies finished their processing of the prisoners, the people who had survived the concentration camp. And it turned out that one of them was actually a resident of this small town in northern Germany where she had relocated. And when this individual got there and recognized at the time him, he broke into his villa kind of thing and tortured him and killed him and put him in a window, not a window box, a seat, like a under the window kind of a seat, one of those things. The dismembered parts went into there. And when he, was dying, he was very angry and offended, incensed even, that this individual had no right to do this to them, and who the heck did they think they were, and so wanted to come back, find that person, and kill them. And was immediately born into a body. It was like a matter of a couple of minutes, according to the book. And then grew up in this one and had two personalities. Had the personality of the previous life because hadn't gone through any processing at all, any overview, and getting through the things that happened and coming to any kind of conclusion. It was sort of an instant transfer of energy. And so she was born with her nascent personality for this life, and then this full-blown personality from this past life that was just there seeking revenge. And that was the reason why, because she was looking for this guy to kill him. That was apparently the only thing on this other personality's mind. So it was sort of an odd position to be put in, being shown all this and then wondering, what do I do with this information? And I decided that since she had come to me in the astral or dream state and asked me for help, and then they had shown me this, then I needed to tell her what I saw. It was supposed to happen. So I called her on the phone and I told her all of this information. She then told me that she didn't know who her parents were. She was adopted, but she knew fluent German from the time she was about 3 or 4 years old. And she had to learn English. No one knew why she could speak perfect German, which sort of lent validity to what the Akashic record showed me. Again, some verification, real world, real time kind of evidence that it wasn't just all imaginary. And also, that's sort of the kind of imagination I really didn't have at the time. That's not, if I was making up someone's past life, that probably would not have been it. So, so it was interesting, and I don't know if it helped her or not. she definitely had this kind of attitude that she was better than other people. And I don't know if that was a combination of the past personality and present life experiences, or just an overshadowing of a past personality on a current life, or just some other factors I was unaware of because, I'm not a psychologist. And, but it was definitely an interesting experience for me. And that would be the only time I had that kind of experience in the Akashic records. Although being in the Akasha is something I am comfortable with on the whole. Uh, I can get into that right frame of mind, maybe partly because of remembering past lives, and having seen, seen other times and so forth. So the concept of everything happening at once, or all things being connected, or whatever it is that helps me to get there and not lose my mind, is there. And when I was channeling, I did have a couple of experiences with an energetic force that I called silence, because I couldn't think of any other word in the English language that could describe the intensity of this presence's energetic signature. And that particular energy I was able to see through time, like follow the thread of something through its history to its beginnings, and say, okay, here's this string. It started over here and it went this way, and like a string river inside of a weaving of some kind. Um, but really, if my purpose here is to learn how to become a part of the earth, its biosphere, embrace the life I'm in, um, try to be as present as I can. Floating around through time doesn't help me with that part. It's just sort of an occasional thing that happened to me. And I used to think it'd be really way awesome. I'm sure there's a lot of people who think that. If you could project through time, then you could go back in history and you could actually see, how events actually unfolded. But considering the fact that you're doing it in a place where thoughts become whatever you think, your reality around you becomes whatever it is that you think, how can you be 100% sure that what you're seeing isn't your own um, concoction? And that's the thing, is the discerning the difference between your own imagination concocting something for your brain or your personality's benefit, um, or reality of what really happened. Uh, we, there's a lot of questions when it comes to that. So, how useful it is, I don't know. But when it comes to like things on the other side, there's different parts to each of those dimensions, whether it's the astral or the mental realities that are out there, which is, the video on building your own astral temple, has to do with that idea of constructing something from your own thoughts and feelings and creating a reality that's there. And some groups get good enough at that where they have a common meeting place that they can go to and do ritual if they can't get together, or have, some kind of encounter with either their higher self or other members of their group or what have you. Again, that discernment is vital, because it's easy for us to swallow our own narrative compared to like an external narrative, and get lost in our own fantasy reality, what we would like to see happen versus what is happening. So, again, as I said earlier, the important thing is remember free will. I've had spirits ask me to do some stuff, and I've said no, because either I didn't feel competent to do it, or I didn't feel it was me that should do it, or it was the right time for me to do it. And, just because a spirit being pops up and says, hey, I'd like you to do this thing, doesn't mean you have to. Like, up to us. And that's part of being a person involved in magic, ritual, witchcraft, um, shamanism, any of the other words that describe the reality of going between the worlds and and trying to sift through that massive amount of information, the the point is shaping our own self. And by choosing what you pay attention to and what you don't pay attention to, you are actually shaping your own personality. When it comes to uh, having been given like a, what would you call it? It's not quite a goal, but like something you feel you have to do, a mission, objective to help the world. That gets into another layer of things. Because, I definitely used to think that if the world fell apart and everything went to hell, it would be because I hadn't done what I was supposed to do, that somehow it would be my fault. And it took a long time for me to realize that I was taking on more responsibility than was mine. We need to share that responsibility with all people. Everyone is responsible for their own part. And if we can teach ourselves how to be responsible for our part, then we can shine an example to others to how to be responsible for their part. The thing about moving forward, like from uh, whatever we're in, whether it's our collective history, what's going on around us in the time that we find ourselves in, or our personal history and the choices we've made and the consequences that have happened because of them, um, if we're not accepting the reality that we're in, like if you don't see the lump or the wart or the thing in the room staring at you in the corner, or you know the activities of the people that are around you and how they're behaving, your own part in that, and how you're participating in the collective narrative that we're writing together, if you can't see that, you can't change it. You can't change yourself unless you know who you are. And accepting who you are, that's the shadow work part of it. Knowing what your instincts tell you, what your past informs you, what your weaknesses and strengths are, so that then you can actually chart a course forward and become a better version of yourself. It can't happen without acceptance. And that's true whether it's an addiction, whether it's a physical addiction or an illness, or a mental construct or what have you. If all of our time is spent in an attempt to prove ourselves worthy, or right, then we're missing the whole point of the exercise, in my opinion, because it's all about, you know, becoming you, whatever that is. Authenticity is not something that happens without effort. And like when I broke all the rules of common courtesy in my family and decided to write a letter to my father and then send a copy of that to everyone else in the family, the waves I made were really quite spectacular. I did that in order to help break the pattern and to shine a light on it, and make it so that other people couldn't continue to ignore the reality that was right in front of them, in the hope that we could break that pattern of dysfunction and go forward and have a better pattern. Um, and the letter I wrote to my father was pretty intense. And even in the middle of writing that letter, towards the end of it, I said to him, even after all the things he had done to me and everyone else, I could still admire him if he could accept his part, his responsibility, get treatment, stop drinking, go through the process. But going through that process when you're that far into it and you've done that much is scary. And it takes a particular type of courage that is difficult to describe. So, for any of you who are going through something and are about to face those things in yourself, I have nothing but admiration, because I know how hard it is. But I can tell you from this end of it that it's worth it. You can come out the other side and be more complete and more whole. And really, in the end, whatever narrative we've come up with is less important than how we act. It's our actions that define how other people see us and how we see ourselves and how the world responds to us. So if you're out there doing something that's positive for your neighborhood, for your family, for your environment, even if it fails, it doesn't matter. If you're out there trying, it makes an impact and it makes a difference. Always interesting to see where I go when I start talking about a subject. You never know where it will end. But that's because everything is connected. So let's see, is there anything else I can say about this that's useful? Except, trying to maintain sanity and being grounded, which is why grounding is so friggin' important. You've got to keep grounded so that you don't go flying off into a fantasy reality and think that you're God and you're going to save the world and everyone else is going to die because you say so. Not a good look. So I guess that's probably enough of this part of this. And we'll probably do other videos in the future trying to cover more specifics in how to work with each of them and that kind of thing. But there have been a lot of questions about this in particular, so I thought I should take a stab at it, see what happens. So as usual, any questions you have, send them to me. I'll answer them as well as I can, and what you will get will be my opinion and my experience of things, because that's all I have to go on. I've read a lot of books, but that doesn't mean I agreed with them. It all depends on how they're used. And so that's why I'm doing these videos, to share my actual experience of these various ideas and what some of the consequences can be. So we're coming closer to Samhain, and right now I think is new moon today that I'm making this video, so it seems appropriate for subject matter. So we're starting a new beginning in the next couple of days, and remember, communicate. Mercury may be retrograde, but we can still try and communicate to our best of ability. And if someone misunderstands us, let it go, because it's probably Mercury messing with your head, right? All right. So have yourself a wonderful time between now and the next time I talk to you guys. And this is Siofra's Magic Alcove, and this has been Siofra Bradigan. Blessed be.